Live. Let's dive right in. My name is Peter Lewis. I'm the host of LTC Heroes, the podcast, and today I'm excited to have Zach Rynders on the program. Zach and I met a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, through another podcast guest, and his story is unique, and I really want to bring it to the long-term care community. Zach, you are the first PT that I've ever spoken to, and you're definitely probably the youngest person and probably the strongest person. Tell me what you do and how we got introduced.
Yeah, so my name is Zach Rynders. I am a physical therapist, so I have a clinical doctorate in physical therapy and a license to practice PT. I'm currently running a program that is health and wellness for seniors. We have a company called Live to Ascend, and we go in mainly to long-term care facilities, and we work with residents right on site. It's kind of evolved over the last year, and we'll get into that, I believe, in a little bit. My background, though, I got into physical therapy. Kind of always knew that I wanted to do something in healthcare, and playing sports most of my life. Physical therapy was kind of always on my radar, and I got into PT. What really grabbed me for physical therapy and grabbed my attention was seeing my brother wounded in Iraq and rehabbing from that, and seeing that side of PT. Like, I didn't, growing up, I just thought PT was sports. That's all I really knew. But seeing a lot of hospital-based setting and even inpatient rehab, neurological rehab, I thought it was really interesting, and you could have a more significant impact on people than just always orthopedics. So that's kind of what brought me into PT. And then from there, I've been in a lot of different roles within PT, but it's kind of all led me to where I'm currently at. I ran a gym for many years, was a certified strength and conditioning coach, still am. But I've kind of blended PT and coaching into a position or role that I'm currently in.
And could you mention the individual who introduced us, and then follow it up with kind of the way that he courted you and tried to talk you into working in long-term care?
Yeah. So Greg is an executive director at Wesley Lee Hill, and he has been in senior housing for about 30 years, I believe. I knew Greg through his wife. His wife was a member at my gym for many years, and Greg approached me in the middle of 2020, so pretty much right in the middle of COVID, and he asked me about the potential of having me run his fitness program for his residents. And obviously, I'd worked in many settings and similar settings as a PT, but I was so busy at the time just trying to navigate COVID and run a business and run the gym. I told him, like, hey, I would really love to help, but I don't think I have the time. I'm working from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day. And it's not that he didn't hear that, but I think he saw the potential and the potential impact that a PT could have, and someone with the skill set of both coach and PT to blend that. He basically didn't let me say no. So I tried to politely decline, I think about 4 times. And after that, Greg, he actually had a sit down meeting with me and was like, hey, why don't we just come out? You can see the facility and kind of see what I'm talking about, and we'll see if it's a good fit, potentially good fit, and we'll go from there. And so I did, and walking through his facility and talking to him about the decline that he's seen from his residents and what sort of fitness program they had before, ran by the YMCA. So the YMCA they went away when COVID started, and he didn't have anything, and he saw a rapid decline in his residents. And he talked to me about it, and I didn't really fully grasp the, I would say, severity of that, because I didn't get to see him beforehand. But I decided to tell him, like, okay, let's try this. I think these people do need help, and if not me, then who? So we started running the program from there, and it's evolved to what it is today. And kind of as you and I had talked, it was basically started as a project, if you will, and evolved from there. And it really evolved because of the impact that I was seeing quickly, but also over time. It really opened my eyes to the potential here and the need, and really the like purpose and passion that it provided for me. But the impact, it's both ways. It's a positive situation for both the residents and for myself.
I'm wondering, Zach, what your first expectations were. When you're at conversation 3 or 4 with Greg Burge, and for anyone who hasn't heard Greg was on the podcast LTC Heroes back in April, and he reached out to me, I believe, the end of May, and he said, "Peter, I need 10 minutes of your time. I got to introduce you to this amazing story, and I want you to know how Zach is changing my resident's life." And I knew right away that this would be great. So I'm glad we're connecting now already in November. And I'm interested in what your first expectations were when you were talking to Greg about potentially making your first visit to one of his facilities. Did you think, is this just going to be a lighter version of what you do at your gym? Is this going to be kind of like a CrossFit for seniors 101 without any weights? And at what point did you realize you might have a greater impact on their lives than you have on your gym members?
That's a really good question, and I think it speaks. The answer will speak volumes to what the program has done for me and has done for the residents. When Greg first approached me, I didn't really have any expectations. I think because I was so busy just trying to navigate COVID myself, I was thinking, I guess if I had to define it, I would say just a basic fitness program. Just run some classes, maybe a couple classes a week, and do some basics and
like a slower version of an 8th grade PE class, maybe is what
pretty
you had in
much.
mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
That would probably be a good description of what I was expecting in my mind. But at the same time, I also knew that like anything, part of the reason I tried to politely decline Greg was I don't like to do anything that I'm not all in on. And I told him that, like, look, I would love to run this program, but if I can't commit like 100% effort to it, then I don't want to do it. I don't want to let you down, and I don't want to let your residents down. But when I went and met with Greg, and I already knew Greg a little bit, but I didn't know him professionally, right? So I didn't know the setting that he worked in. I didn't really know what he did for a living. And when I met with Greg, what was very apparent to me was his passion and his drive. And it is not about punching the clock and just working a job. And that, honestly, before even meeting any of his residents, that's what grabbed my attention and made me think, this is somebody that I would probably want to work with. And I don't know if I've actually ever even said that to him, but
I think he'll know now.
Yeah, he might. It's what really got me to say, okay, let's explore this. And I would say pretty quickly, I realized the impact I was going to have, because when we started to run classes, I came into his facility and looked at like, okay, what sort of classes were they running before? Because for one, you don't want to come in and just drastically change everything, because a lot of times people are resistant to change, or they're just not comfortable with change. And I would say, especially older adults, that sometimes they're like, hey, this is what we were doing before. Who are you? I don't know who you are. All of a sudden, why is it changing? And then also maybe there were some things that didn't need to be changed. But I didn't really have a playbook to go off of, because it's not like I got to go observe classes for the YMCA. So I went in and thought, okay, what do I know and what am I good at? I'm good at teaching movement. And I'm good at relating your exercise program back to your actual life. That's really the whole point. And I've always believed that if what you do inside of the gym, so to speak, doesn't improve what you do outside of the gym.
I want to interrupt you. Will you say those 2 phrases again? I really like that. That should be on your website.
What you do inside of the gym. Oh yeah. So it's the idea of what you do inside of the gym should absolutely improve your life outside of the gym.
Great.
because and this is something that I always spoke to when I ran a gym, spoke to our clients for general pop, right? General population. I tried to get that across to them. And some people immediately understood. And some people, they were there for that. But some people were just there to like just sweat and do the most kipping pull-ups and handstand push-ups that you could possibly do. And then I'm not trying to talk negatively about those people or those things, but it was, I think a lot of times I would struggle. I was struggling with like, hey, do you not see the bigger picture here? Like you could get there, but there's progressions and you need to understand that like this should carry over to your life outside of the gym because your goal is probably not to be the best exerciser in the world.
What does that mentality look like when you get into the long-term care facility? How does
Yeah.
the resident's mentality differ from your client's mentality inside the gym?
I think they have a much better understanding of what the goal is, right? Because their goals are more function based and not basically fitness achievement based.
Mhm.
And it's not that they don't want to be able to lift a certain amount of weight, but I'm really glad you asked that question now that I'm thinking about it, because one of the things that quickly grabbed my attention when working with the residents and not just Greg was when we went in, I had them fill out goal sheets. Like, why are you here? What do you want to get out of this? Like, I can't tell you. I need to know. I could help guide you, but I need to know why you're here. And reading those goal sheets, I'm not like a lot of people laugh when I say this, but I don't typically wear my emotions on my sleeve. Like I'm not like a very outwardly like emotional person or really talk about emotions, but truly,
You fit the stereotype of an owner
yeah,
of a CrossFit gym, is what you're
right,
saying?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That or people look at my haircut, my square head, and they're like, yeah, of course.
Right.
But reading their goals is it. I honestly, I started to tear up. Was like, whoa, these are the people I want to work for.
Can you remember a phrase or a word that stood out to you?
Yeah, definitely. The number one thing that stood out to me, there was a lady, she is 89 years old, and her number one goal was to not be a burden on anybody. She wants to train so that she's not a burden on her family.
Hmm.
And when I read that, which by the way is like month one, early on, that immediately clicked, was like, okay, I'm here for it. This is like what I'm like, this is gonna get me out of bed in the morning. I want to go help these people in any possible way I can. And it really motivated me to analyze the program. Okay, how do we get there? What's the best way to go about this? What sort of results do we need to track? Where do we start? And it honestly, I took what I knew from coaching clients. So it was a CrossFit gym, but we worked with people of all different ages and backgrounds. And it wasn't your typical CrossFit gym because I am a physical therapist. I would get a lot of people that were older that like, hey, I'm interested in training, but I'm afraid to get hurt. And this is why I came here. And I took what I knew from that and from being a PT and applied it to the classes. And it worked really, really well. And we just taught movement. We're teaching people how to move.
Zach, I feel like we should do a small pause, and I should have started with this. There's going to be someone who's watching this says that I have a PT in my organization. They're going to say
Mhm.
I have classes from my local Y. You have tests from the beginning that are different. You already explained you have goals. Well, now there might be some people who ask those goals, but you incorporate those goals into your methodology, your structure. I also feel so you have tests at the beginning that I think that are different. I believe that your methodology is a little bit different, and I believe there's some intentionality that seems a little bit different when the way that you present your program to me. Can you explain how you might be different than the current setup that a facility has in Kansas or Ohio or
Yeah.
Indiana today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For one, I do want to make it clear that we're never our intent is never to replace the therapy team. I obviously strongly believe in physical therapy. It's my profession. But the limitation to therapy comes with the limitation in insurance coverage typically. So research unequivocally shows that you need about 52 hours of intervention in order to have a clinically significant reduction in fall risk. Now, we train more than just balance and fall risk, but it's a really good topic to discuss. 52 hours of intervention, you're never going to see that as a PT. And it doesn't mean you can't have an impact, but really your impact as a PT is going to be limited by the number of hours you get with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times what happens is they just get discharged to, at best, go to a fitness program, usually. And if that fitness program is not working with the PT program to understand where this person's coming from and what they need to work on, then that care kind of ends there. There's no gap between discharge and full return to function, or even improving where their previous level of function was at. So we work with the PT teams, not intended to replace it. Now, as far as like the fitness program, how does it differ? You're right. The assessments is a huge thing. So we come in, we do clinical balance assessments. Now, a lot of times, like skilled nursing, that's typically required, right?
Mm-hmm.
But independent living, assisted living, a lot of these people aren't getting that. And it's not a balance assessment in the sense of just walk 10 feet, right? There's a lot of different tasks we have people do. We analyze their gait. We assess static and dynamic balance. We'll do dual task balance assessments. And what I mean by dual task is kind of real life. So you assess somebody's balance while, for lack of a better term, distracting them, having them cognitive function focused on something different. And that replicates real life a little bit more. So you think about like, okay, you could do a balance assessment.
I imagine you like putting a fly sweater over my head and pushing me.
Yeah, not quite, but a good example would be like walk forward and count backwards. And a lot of people, that the cognitive demand, it'll distract them a little bit. And now you start to get a more comprehensive analysis of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And PTs do this a lot, right? And
Right.
this isn't like I didn't innovate this. It's just what you know as a PT. But what you're doing is now bringing it to everybody, and by incorporating it as part of a fitness program. So there's the assessments there. Another part of the assessment that's really innovative is blood work. So when we started around the program, it's like, okay, I'm proving that I'm improving people's balance and reducing their risk of falls. And you could track fall data over time. That's easy. I shouldn't say easy, but it's definitely possible to do. You could improve strength and you can track strength. The blood work is bridging that gap between saying, okay, we've improved their fitness, and in turn, it's going to improve their health and longevity. But you don't really have a good marker unless you are analyzing blood work. So we brought in blood tests, and the blood test that we bring in, we analyze cardiac health, and it goes way beyond lipids and cholesterol. So we look at inflammation to the endothelial lining, and there's an innovative cardiac tool or assessment tool that's been validated through years of research. We know that it's accurately measuring inflammation of the endothelial lining, and it's really good at predicting heart attacks. So it gives people a risk score over the next 5 years. It's telling you what is your risk of cardiac event in the next 5 years. But it's always something that we can improve. 80% of those factors that contribute to risk of heart attack are modifiable. So it's not about, hey, feel bad because you're going to have a heart attack. It's like, where's your cardiac health at now, and how is it improving over time?
I want to pause and interrupt you. How did you determine that these blood tests, and more specifically, a very robust, very exhaustive, comprehensive blood test? Did you do this at your gym beforehand? Did Greg tell you like, hey, would this help you? Like, how did this come into part of your assessment?
Well, the thought of blood tests came from strength and conditioning coaches that I've worked with in the past, and some of the best in the world, right? Like training gold medalists and professional athletes. A lot of times they'll look at blood work, and so I knew it was like it's always on my mind. I've done blood work myself to kind of analyze that, and then also health professions, you look at blood work a lot. But this cardiac test specifically, like how did I land on that? Well, I started to look, obviously, cardiac assessment, cardiac health, huge factor, right? It's still like the number one leading cause of death. But cholesterol alone doesn't do a good job of predicting who's going to have heart attack. So I thought we could do cholesterol and lipids, but is there something else out there? And it was a little bit of coincidence of running into a guy that runs the company and partnering with them, the cardiologist developing the test, and talking to him about it and understanding like, okay, endothelial lining and unstable cardiac lesions and really predicting heart attack, and then going through all of that research and on that specific test and taking the test myself and analyzing that over time. I'm kind of skeptical of everything in general. So at first I was like, okay, well, what is this? Let's look at this. So being able to implement that myself and see the motivation that it provides, that was a huge factor. And we're actually recently I've been getting a ton of feedback, positive feedback from the residents that we've worked with, because these people are now going through their follow-up test. And they're telling me like how much their in score improved, but most importantly, the motivation it provided. These people they're saying like, hey, I went and got my cardiac score and I lost 10 pounds in the next 2 weeks. It's like, it was the most motivating thing in the world to me. We also run COVID antibody testing because we're able to analyze it. Okay, we're already drawing blood. It's a relevant test. It's not readily available to everyone. It helps us determine who might need a booster. And so that one feedback I got right off the top of my head was like, hey, I lost 10 pounds. I improved my cardiac health. I ran out the next day and got a COVID antibody or a COVID booster because my antibodies were really low and my post-test they're, way elevated. That gentleman was just simply telling me like, I really appreciate you providing this. And a lot of times, the people that participate in the fitness classes, they all pretty much do the blood work. Not all of them, but most of them. But what's happening is a lot of other people that don't participate in the fitness program, because the blood work is readily available on site and it doesn't cost them anything. They jump on board with the blood work, and then it becomes motivating for them to start to participate in fitness programs, because when you measure something, you want to have the solution to improve it. So what we don't want to do is bring in the blood work and then say, okay, good luck, go figure out how to improve your health and fitness on your own. You have the resource right there. The program's already implemented in the facility. All you have to do is sign up for a class and show up.
So I'm gonna ask for your forgiveness and thanks for your patience for letting me jump around so much. I want to move to, you start to figure this out. At what point so you start off with 20 or 30 residents, and then you realize you found something, you found an assessment that is special and fits up with the specific audience that you're working with, the segment you're working with. At one point, do you decide, I'm going to sell my gym, I'm going to only focus on long-term care? And where does the brand Live to Ascend come from?
Yeah. So, totally fine jumping around. I totally get it. There's a ton of moving parts to the program. But I appreciate you kind of reining that back into that. I would say about 3 months. It's about all it took for me to realize that this is what I want to do. And it's not that I don't want to work with general population anymore. My passion for owning and running a gym was kind of already, little questionable from COVID, but it took, I would say, about 3 months before I started to see the change that we were having. And what we started to see was residents coming from like, they'd show up kind of in I guess street clothes, if you will, or baggy clothes, and not really knowing what to expect. They were a little nervous too, and it was like their first interaction with anybody coming out of COVID. Like they didn't really get to do anything, so no one knew anything really. And I would say about 3 months in, you're starting to see people show up in workout gear. They're laughing with each other, joking around. The buzz and the energy in each class was just, you could feel it. And that's when I started to see the changes, the movement mastery, like people being able to like watch a class of 15 people, anywhere from 70 to 100 years old, perform full depth squats with perfect form, better than I was ever able to teach a class at my gym. And I was like, whoa, how did this happen? And it's because they want to learn. They listen more than any group of people I've ever worked with, more than just working in PT.
I want to stop on that because I want to see if that is, some people call it your compass, your North Pole. Yesterday, I interviewed a beautiful nurse, Wendy Gores, and her story was that she realized she fell in love with long-term care when she realized she hung out all day long with 50 and 60 grandmas and grandpas.
Yeah.
What is it about long-term care that made you realize that, you want to spend the next 10 years or 20 years of your life? Is it what you just said, that they're willing to learn, they listen differently? How would you phrase it?
I would say it's a combination. Willing to learn is a huge part of it. The fact that they do listen, yeah, it's part of willing to learn, but it's also their stories and getting to know them. And so when I run a class, and I try to impart this on our coaches as well, is you got to know everyone in the class. That's what makes it motivating for you. Teaching is boring if you don't know who you're teaching. And their stories it's really incredible. Like, for example, when you're doing strength training is a huge part of what we do because it carries over to daily life. It's not just about being a meathead. It's about teaching movement and then building strength that carries over to daily life. But in doing that, you can't just be nonstop working. So let's say a class is 45 minutes from warm up to cool down. A lot of times we'll demonstrate movement, teach movement, perform movement, take a short break. During the rest times, I think usually for my own interest, engage residents and ask them about their life. And those stories that you hear and the interactions that you see with them, that's was like what was guiding me. That's what I really realized. And one story that really sticks out to me is there's a gentleman and his wife both participate in classes, and so he was an infantry officer and did 2 tours in Vietnam. And when you just hear that, you kind of already have like a picture of who this person is in your mind. Mm-hmm. During a class, I started to ask people about love languages. And it was just something that I had learned about in the last, I would say, 5 years, is just the concept that different people receive and give love in different ways.
It's the book that I've gifted most in my life.
You know what? I could say the same.
I read it about 7 or 8 years, no, probably 10 years ago. And about 8 years ago, I think I brought 15 copies on Amazon and took it down to South America where I lived and just started giving it away to people who would embrace it. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Awesome.
You're the first person to bring it up on this show. Thank you.
So when I was bringing it up to the class, I was honestly just curious if they knew about it, because I didn't, and obviously until I did. But this gentleman shared with the class that him and his wife used to teach a class on it. And it was like the last thing I expected. It was like, no way. And the coolest part of that story is the rest of the residents in the class, they all came alive, and they were like, you need to do a class on this. Can you do a workshop for us? And it was just like little stories like that daily really added up to being like, yeah, this is the group of people that I want to work with. They are motivating. Their stories, they're humbling, and they put things into perspective for me. And it's like we like to talk about enriching their lives, but it much more so, I would strongly argue, that it enriches my life more than I'm enriching theirs. Obviously, I hope I'm impacting their life, but I don't know if I can impact it the way they're impacting mine.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that if I had to put it down into one phrase, what I love most about it is I learned from an older generation that appreciates that it's just the gratitude that they teach me. I don't know if it's my generation or I don't think that we pay attention to small things in the way that the elderly and senior communities are. So
I
just
think
wanted
that's very, very well said, and much more concise than me. But yeah, I would agree. There's no way I could argue that.
in terms of kind of back to if someone walks in only thinking about improving their movement. Can you give me a story of an individual win of someone who maybe wasn't able to, get themselves out of a chair, or give me a story of a person who was able to do a squat and they were impacted by it, or their family members were, or their daughter was? Do you have any examples of something strength wise, movement wise, that it was a life changer for them?
Yeah. I have a lot of examples. The biggest challenge in answering that question is to separate the the strict movement part of the question from the emotional and psychological
Well, you can put
improvement.
them together. You can tie
Yeah,
them
I was
together.
gonna say I could tell the story about the movement, but every single story that comes to mind, there's been a cascade effect from it.
Okay.
But one lady that comes to mind, her husband was coming to class for a little while, and she started to attend classes. I would say a couple months into it. And I've seen that a lot. A lot of times one spouse will come to class and they'll have a lot of success and enjoy it. And then the other spouse comes to class. Usually for the first time in their life, they're attending a fitness class. Um, this lady showed up in a wheelchair, and I didn't really know much about her when she came in. And just getting to know her a little bit, she didn't seem um, she didn't seem too like upbeat in general. And in classes, a lot of times she would kind of be self-limiting. And I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. And that's really not my profession to analyze it, but it's really to look at, okay, like where is she at now and what can she do? And let's highlight that and help her see that.
Mhm.
And helping her even with like wheelchair fitment and teaching both her and her husband how to adjust things in the wheelchair, swing the foot pegs out of the way, and um, proper seating position in the wheelchair. And then from there, it was about teaching the ability to move out of the wheelchair. So obviously, a lot of underlying conditions in that setting, but in her case, primarily stemming from back pain, but not like a neurological defect, not a spinal cord injury. Um, in one of the classes early on, I saw her get up out of the wheelchair and start to perform some standing exercises. And immediately it was like, okay, I need to highlight that. And I need to tell her on a very frequent basis how good of a job she's doing. And um, that progressed to teaching her how much she can do. So now she might show up in a wheelchair, but not every time, where it was just always in a wheelchair. And now she's doing squats to the chair and standing up and controlling it. And from that, I start to see her laughing and smiling and joking. And there's something that I was told from a strength and conditioning coach who actually has worked with a lot of Division I college programs. So a setting you wouldn't think would translate. And he was given a talk, and something that he said stood out to me. And he said, motivation has an expiration, and it's often quite short. And what he was really saying is you have to get really good at saying the right thing to the right person at the right time. And what that means in that setting is highlighting what people are able to do. It's not about what you can't do. And it's those little daily wins that add up to a change of mindset. And that's really for that lady and plenty of others, that's really been we're experts at teaching movement,
Hmm.
but you are also working with that person. Like it's not just about movement. Show them what they can do and tell them, even simple things. like giving that person individual time, like maybe when they're walking out of class, going up to them and say like, hey, I love the way you're able to do this today, or you did a great job with these things. It actually has worked really well. And I would say that would be the most standout story to me.
That's a beautiful story. I want to pivot into where Live to Ascend is going. Where is it? Is it in just one community, in 20 communities? Before we do that, I would like to take a short break and just thank our sponsor. Our sponsor of LTC Heroes and our live stream program is Experience.Care. Experience Care was a pioneer in electronic health records in the United States in 1969, and today they continue to be that pioneer. Their latest point of care upgrade, amazing customer service, free online training, and great new software products for your long-term care organization. Head on over to www.experience.care to see what they're doing. In terms of, Zach, in terms of Live to Ascend, how many communities are you in today? How many residents on average are going to your classes in any given month? And then tell me where you're headed. Are you develop your own methodology? Are you working on a patent? Do you want this to go viral beyond you? Tell me what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, so we're currently working in 4 different facilities or buildings, communities, if you will, full time, meaning we run all of their fitness classes, and we do assessments, and we do balance training, we do the blood work. For those facilities that we work with, the blood work is offered to both staff and residents because we find that it carries over for staff as well. It's very pertinent information. For the facilities that we work in full time, we started to look at, okay, like how do we take the impact that we're having here and carry it over to other people? Because a lot of facilities, a lot of communities will have fitness programs, and they might really appreciate and enjoy the fitness director there, but maybe they're not able to do balance assessments and the innovative blood work and the cardiac assessments and the individual wellness plan development. So what we did was develop levels of our program. So we have 3 different levels, and the first level is where we go into a facility and we provide a comprehensive assessment for all of their residents that want to participate. Obviously, it's not forcing anyone to, but it allows them to interact with us. So we go in as either myself or other doctors of physical therapy will do the balance assessments. We'll do fitness assessments. So we actually have cameras that measure velocity, movement velocity for power, because it's a very important predictor of falls and all-cause mortality. We measure strength, endurance, and then we do the blood work. And we take all of those numbers and we put it into, as well as goal setting, and we put it into an individual wellness plan for each resident. And then for that level 1, so we do that regardless, even for a facility that we're working full time. But for level 1 of our programming, we develop that, and then we work with the on-site fitness staff so that they can understand how to interpret this data, how to track that over time. We'll come in typically twice a year and do that full assessment for everyone. But then we also work with that staff on things that we know work. Like how do we safely progress people? How do we set precautions for other people? We even have a physician on our team that's able to go through medical history and provide recommendations on precautions and progressions. And I work directly with that physician. So we provide all that info for the facility. What that does for a facility is it makes it a lot cheaper because they're not paying us full time for classes. They just come in and we just come in and run the assessment, and then we work with their staff. Level 2, it's the same thing, but we design the actual classes and we work with that trainer so we deliver the workout to the trainer. There's movement demonstrations, there's progressions, everything's written right into it. And all that trainer needs to do is take all that and implement it. But it's really important that trainer understands how to coach. So we work with that person, that on-site staff. Level 3 is where we do everything. So really the difference is assessments, assessments in writing workouts, assessments, writing workouts, and actually providing the trainer.
You just went to a leading age convention and trade show, so I know that you've spoken to a lot of organizations. Do you have a feel for which is the tier that is going to kick off quickest and where you are going to expand to? What's your next state? You're based in Washington now. What's
Mhm.
going to be the first out of state facility to pick you up?
Out of state's going to be pretty hard to tell, but I there's a lot of facilities in California that expressed interest. We're able to travel all over the country to do the assessments, and I do think the level one will spread pretty fast, but I also think level three will be close behind it, because what a lot of people will find is, okay, these assessments and this team of medical professionals is coming in and really providing a really comprehensive picture of the health of our entire community. And the most important thing about assessment is being able to change it. So I think a lot of times what'll we're already seeing what's happening is facilities do those assessments and then they think, okay, we need a really, really expert coach to teach this. So level three is also then important too. But I do know there are some really phenomenal fitness staff already um, in this field. So that's not to say that organizations won't have people able to run our program and kind of implement our training and methodologies. And one of the other questions you had asked me is kind of like future plans. Where do you see this going? Um, One of the things that I learned early on in working in this community or this field is research is kind of lacking. I think it's a pretty underserved population, especially with fitness and wellness. And there's a ton of research out there that shows you can improve strength late in life. You could build muscle mass late in life. You could even improve power, meaning the speed that you're moving at. And that's a very, very important factor to train. So that's why we use cameras to measure velocity. It's the same camera that's used in college facilities and professional facilities, but we've just taken it and implemented it into our program because it's giving us real-time feedback on how fast somebody's moving. It also helps with intent. So you teach the movement first, you make sure they master the movement, and then you start to build power into it. What we're doing with all that data, on top of improving their fitness and their function, is our intent is to rewrite clinical guidelines on how to successfully train seniors. And the purpose is, it's not about like, don't tell anyone our secrets. That's not it at all. It's like we're having a lot of success. And I do think this information would be very useful for a lot of other people, a lot of other PTs and trainers to have. Because when I started doing this, I looked to the research and was like, okay, we know speed and power can be improved. We know strength can be improved, but what's safe? What's to be expected? How should you progress it? And there's that research is lacking. There's no good clinical indicators of you need to move at this speed in order to prevent a fall. Speed and power translates to falls. Think about, like, if you're the strongest person in the world, you catch your toes. If you can't move fast, you're going to fall.
Hmm.
So if we know that we can improve speed and power, we know it's important, but like, how do you do that? And how fast do you need to be able to move? So being able to rewrite clinical guidelines on training seniors, that is what is going to be like, if you want to talk about legacy, that's the way to do it. Like,
Hmm.
that's how you're going to help the most amount of people. It's not about how many people can contract with our company. How do you bring this to trainers, and how does that spread?
I love it.
And it's always through research.
I love it. I'm sure that when I check in with you a year from now, your impact in long-term care is going to be contagious and viral. I'm interested in how long-term care has impacted you, and I'm going to ask you the question in the following manner. Take me back a year ago when you told one of your 5 closest friends that you were selling a gym and you're going to go start working in nursing homes. What was their reaction, and how did you explain to them that they got it all wrong And they just kept looking at you, Zach, what happened? And then because it's changed the way you are, I'm guessing it's changed chemically the way that you look at your life, your perspective. Tell me back to the story when you had a friend who bullied you.
That's a pretty funny way that you posed the question because it's pretty accurate. Most people, that was my persona, I guess. It's like kind of like my entire definition of me. It was like a physical therapist and strength coach and running a gym. And a lot of people would always talk to me about like, don't you want to work with professional athletes? And playing sports in college myself, and was like, not really. I knew I didn't want to do that, but that conversation typically went the same with all 5 of those people. Of what? Like, why would you do that? Like, are you okay? And it wasn't always like in a negative light of like, why would you want to work with
Yeah,
seniors?
more surprise, right?
But like, is anyone going to be interested in that? That's a question that was probably the most common, is why is anyone interested in it? And now it's like, it's actually, you're right, it has changed my life. And simply put, it's made me a lot happier. It's provided a lot of purpose and passion. And I believe when you have purpose, you have passion. And when you have that, you have happiness. And it's not about defining your success simply based on career,
Mm-hmm.
but it carries over to other aspects of life. I know 100% it has definitely improved my relationship with my wife. And, but I think that comes from improving my own happiness and my own passion and the way I like carry myself daily and the way I see things, right? And that goes back to what we talked about with like, why do you work with seniors? It's because they provide insight and they provide a sense of gratitude that you probably wouldn't get elsewhere.
I want to wrap it up by asking you kind of a business model question. You're currently solving a problem for a long-term care resident. Your end user is potentially not the person who's going to buy your services. How do you make a long-term care owner interested in your product because you're currently more expensive than they have, and they feel like they don't have a problem that you solve?
So we, on the business side of it, you really highlight um, the money that they get back, and you do that in a couple different ways. One is the outcomes. Typically, you start with asking, like what does your current fitness program look like? Are you tracking anything? Is it actually improving the health and fitness of your residents? Is it increasing their length of stay? Is it improving the health of your entire facility? And almost every single time you ask people that, they don't typically say no, but they'll give you a look of like, I don't know what we're tracking, like it's not actually tracking anything. So that's one approach, or it's one part of it. But it's also talking about like showing the data. Like, here are the results that we've had. 87% of our participants demonstrate a clinically significant reduction in fall risk. And that's just data from the last year, right? But that's one important thing to measure when you start talking about reducing the risk of falls. That also reduces, let's say like a CCRC, it's reducing the risk of cost of care. It's keeping residents in independent living longer. Young and healthy attracts young and healthy. And what I mean by that is, imagine like a potential resident taking a tour, and you have young, healthy, vibrant residents. And I don't mean necessarily like biological age young, but they're engaged
Spirit.
in activities. And we even have people come observe a class. And I always tell people, like, come see a class, come see what we're doing. It's not, we're not trying to hide it from everybody. And that's a huge part of it. And then we also help, we participate in sales processes and engage the depositors. A lot of times what I found is, for people on the wait list or depositors, facilities will host events. And when I first attended one of those events, I thought they asked me to attend it just to to be a representation of the fitness program. So I had no clue what it was about. It dawned on me pretty quickly that a lot of times there's not much to offer when you start talking about like, oh, here's our facility. We have a really nice rooms. We have a nice like campus, and that's important, obviously. But then when it came to events, sometimes they would just talk about like, well, we have ice cream socials on Fridays, and I'm like, but what else? And I don't mean to be cynical or negative about it. And it's just about like talking about, okay, what is your fitness program actually doing? Now, if you go to pretty much any community's website, somewhere on their homepage, it's going to talk about fitness. We promote engagement in health and wellness programs, but a lot of times those programs are not very robust, or they don't actually say anything. They like to say everything without saying anything. And that's a huge part of it. So, showing the results, tracking that over time. We've actually had sales directly from our program. I participated in a grand opening event, and a lady came up and spoke with me. And one of her main concerns about moving in was no longer having access to her trainer, and legitimately left that meeting and went to the director and said, that program has sold me on this facility. So, when you start talking about that, it's like, yeah, we want to partner with you.
I hadn't thought of using it as marketing material.
And don't want to add any work to your team. We operate autonomously. Like, we'll schedule everything. We work with you. We need to customize the program to what your community needs. But at the end of the day, we don't want to add work to your plate.
Well, Zach, I'm thankful that Greg introduced us and that you came and joined the program and shared with me what Live to Ascend is doing. I know that there are some listeners and followers, people are going to see this on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook, that are going to say, where can I find Zach? Where can I hear about his programs and explore bringing his program into my facility? Zach, where's the best place for us to find you online?
LiveToAscend.com. If you want, so there'll be contact info right on the website. If you wanted to send an email directly to me, it's just Zach, Z-A-C-H, at livetoascend.com. Two easiest ways to get in touch with us.
Zach, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to connecting with you. I want to follow up with you a year from now to see where you are and how much you're changing the outcomes and care in our industry. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Take care.